Billionaire thought his wife betrayed him, until a DNA test proved the newborn baby was his own son. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now sit back and enjoy every detail. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Hargrove Aerospace headquarters in downtown Seattle. Julian Hargrove stood behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 42nd floor, his steel-gray eyes scanning the bustling city below. At 36, he commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair perfectly styled and a jawline that spoke of determination. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like armor, and his presence alone could silence a room full of executives. But today, something was different. His usual methodical calm felt fractured. The elevator doors chimed softly behind him, and Julian didn't need to turn around to know who had arrived. The gentle click of familiar heels on marble, the subtle scent of vanilla perfume. Harper. "Good morning, Mr. Hargrove," she said, her voice carrying that professional tone she used in the office, though her emerald eyes always held warmth when she looked at him. Harper Quinn was 29 with honey blonde hair that caught the light as she moved, fair skin that flushed pink when she laughed, and an intelligence that had first drawn Julian to her 3 years ago. She was his wife, but here in the corporate world, she maintained her role as senior data analyst with unwavering professionalism. "The quarterly reports are ready for your review," she continued, placing a thick folder on his mahogany desk. Her wedding ring caught the sunlight, a simple platinum band that Julian had chosen because Harper preferred elegance over extravagance. Julian finally turned, studying her face. Harper looked radiant lately, more vibrant than usual. Her cheeks held a glow that made her beautiful features even more striking. "Harper," he said, his deep voice softer now, "you look different today." She smiled, that brilliant smile that had made him forget every wall he'd built around his heart. "Do I?" There was something in her tone, a barely contained excitement that made Julian's pulse quicken. Their marriage had been built on mutual respect and an intellectual connection that surprised them both. Harper was one of the few people who could challenge his strategic thinking, who could see patterns in data that even his team of analysts missed. She was brilliant, driven, and had never once seemed impressed by his wealth, which had been refreshingly different from every other woman he'd known. "Julian," she said, moving closer to his desk, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "I have something to tell you, something wonderful." He raised an eyebrow, setting down the morning's financial reports. "What is it?" Harper's eyes sparkled with unshed tears of joy. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white stick, a pregnancy test with 2 clear pink lines. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "We're going to have a baby, Julian. You're going to be a father." The world stopped. Julian's face went completely blank, his body frozen as if someone had poured ice water through his veins. The pregnancy test felt like it was burning through his vision, and suddenly he couldn't breathe properly. Because hidden in his desk drawer, locked away for the past 8 years, was a medical report that had shattered his world once before. A report that had told him, in clinical black and white, that Julian Hargrove was sterile, that he could never father children. Harper's joyful expression began to falter as the seconds stretched into an eternity of silence. "Julian," she said softly, aren't you happy?" But Julian could only stare at her, his mind racing with a single devastating thought. If he couldn't have children, then whose baby was Harper carrying? Have you ever received news that should have brought you joy, but instead shattered everything you thought you knew about your life? Julian's silence stretched like a chasm between them. Harper's smile faded completely, replaced by confusion and growing hurt, as she watched her husband's face remain stone cold. "Julian, please say something," she whispered, still holding the pregnancy test with shaking hands. He turned away from her, walking back to the window, his hands clenched into fists behind his back. The Seattle skyline blurred as his mind raced. 8 years ago, after a routine physical, the doctor had delivered the devastating news with clinical detachment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hargrove, but the tests show complete azoospermia. You'll never be able to father children naturally." Julian had been 28 then, building his empire, convinced he didn't need anyone. But the diagnosis had felt like a door slamming shut on a future he hadn't even known he wanted. "This is unexpected," he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. Harper set the test down on his desk and moved toward him. "Unexpected?" Julian, we're married. We've talked about having children someday. I know it's sooner than we planned, but have we? Julian turned sharply, his gray eyes cold. Have we really talked about it, Harper? Or have you just mentioned it in passing? The accusation in his tone made Harper step back as if he'd slapped her. What is that supposed to mean? Julian studied her face, searching for signs of deception, for guilt, for anything that would confirm his growing suspicions. Harper looked genuinely confused and hurt, but wasn't that exactly how a skilled liar would look? How far along are you? He asked. I think about 6 weeks. I missed my period, and I've been feeling nauseous in the mornings. Harper's voice was small now, the joy completely drained from her announcement. Julian, you're scaring me. Why aren't you happy about this? 6 weeks. Julian's mind calculated quickly. 6 weeks ago, he'd been traveling extensively. 3 days in Tokyo, 4 days in London, then 2 days in New York. Harper had stayed in Seattle, working on the new satellite project analysis. She'd been putting in long hours, often staying late at the office, with Evan Mitchell, the head of building security. Julian's jaw tightened as he remembered coming home one evening to find Harper laughing at something on her phone. When he'd asked about it, she'd said it was just a funny meme Evan had sent to the staff group chat, but the smile she'd worn had seemed too bright, too personal. I need some air, Julian said abruptly, grabbing his suit jacket from the chair. Julian, wait. Harper reached for his arm, but he pulled away. I have meetings all day, he lied smoothly. We'll talk about this later. But Harper stepped between him and the door, her green eyes blazing with a fire he'd rarely seen. No, we're talking about this now. I just told you we're having a baby and you're acting like I've announced someone died. For a moment, Julian almost told her everything, almost explained about the medical report, about his fears, about why her pregnancy felt impossible. But the words stuck in his throat. If he was wrong, if somehow the doctors had been mistaken, he would look like a fool, and if he was right, I'm just processing, he said instead. This is life-changing news, Harper. Give me some time to wrap my head around it. Harper's expression softened slightly. Of course it's overwhelming. It is for me too. But Julian, we're in this together. We're going to be parents. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach. Our baby. The possessive way she said our made Julian's chest tight. He looked at her hand on her belly and felt nothing but cold suspicion where there should have been wonder and joy. I really do have meetings, he said, his voice gentler but still distant. Congratulations, Harper. This is big news. He kissed her forehead briefly, a gesture that felt more like goodbye than celebration, and left her standing in his office, still holding the pregnancy test that had changed everything. As Julian walked toward the elevator, he caught sight of Evan Mitchell at the security desk in the lobby, 40 floors below. Even from this distance, Julian could see the man's easy smile as he chatted with the receptionist. The elevator doors closed and Julian was alone with his devastating thoughts. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in years. Dr. Marcus Webb, the fertility specialist who had delivered his original diagnosis. It was time to find out if 8-year-old test results could be wrong, and what he would do if they weren't. 3 days had passed since Harper's announcement, and the Hargrove mansion in Bellevue felt like a mausoleum. Julian sat in his home office at midnight, staring at his laptop screen, the blue light casting harsh shadows across his angular features. Dr. Webb's voice from their phone conversation earlier still echoed in his mind. Julian, medical science has advanced significantly since 2016. I'd recommend new tests before drawing any conclusions. But Julian's thoughts weren't on medical advances. They were on the security footage he'd been reviewing for hours. His aerospace company's building had cameras in every corridor, every elevator, every common area. As CEO, Julian had access to all of it. What he found made his blood run cold. Frame by frame, he watched Harper and Evan Mitchell. 2 months ago, Harper staying late, Evan bringing her coffee at 9 p.m., their conversation lasting 27 minutes in the empty analysis lab. 6 weeks ago, Evan walking Harper to her car, his hand briefly touching her lower back, a gesture too familiar, too intimate for mere colleagues. Julian's jaw clenched as he watched Evan lean down to Harper's car window, saying something that made her laugh. That same bright laugh Julian remembered from the phone incident. The home office door creaked open. Harper appeared in the doorway wearing a silk nightgown the color of champagne, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Even in his suspicion, Julian couldn't deny she was breathtaking. "You're still working?" she asked softly, patting barefoot across the hardwood floor. It's past midnight. Julian quickly minimized the security footage window. Couldn't sleep. Harper moved behind his chair, her hands settling on his tense shoulders. Her touch, once comforting, now felt like a lie. You've been distant since I told you about the baby. More distant than usual. I've had a lot on my mind. Julian. Harper's reflection appeared in his darkened laptop screen as she leaned down, her chin nearly touching his shoulder. Talk to me. What's really going on? For a moment, Julian almost surrendered. Almost told her about the medical report locked in his desk drawer, about the impossibility of her pregnancy, about the security footage that painted a picture he didn't want to believe. But when he turned to face her, all he could see was Evan's hand on her back. Just business pressures, he lied smoothly. The Tokyo launch is more complicated than expected. Harper's green eyes searched his face. Is that really all? Julian stood abruptly, forcing her to step back. I'm exhausted, Harper. Can we not do this tonight? Do what? Have a conversation with my husband? Her voice carried a sharp edge now. Julian, I'm pregnant with our child, and you've barely acknowledged it. You haven't asked how I'm feeling, if I've seen a doctor, what our next steps should be. It's like you don't care at all. Of course I care. The words felt hollow even to him. Then show it. Harper's eyes filled with tears she was clearly fighting to hold back. I'm scared too, you know. This wasn't planned for me either. But I thought we'd face it together. Julian watched a single tear escape down her cheek and felt something crack inside his chest. But the crack was immediately filled with cold doubt. Was this performance? Was Harper playing the role of the confused, hurt wife while carrying another man's child? Have you told anyone else? He asked suddenly. Harper blinked, clearly taken off guard by the question. About the pregnancy? No, not yet. I wanted us to process it first, decide when and how to share the news. She paused. Why? No reason. Just wondering about timing. Harper stared at him for a long moment, and Julian saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of understanding, of hurt recognition. You don't believe me, she whispered. About the baby? You think I'm lying about something? Julian's silence was answer enough. Harper's face crumpled and she wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold the pieces together. How can you think that about me? After 3 years of marriage, how can you look at me and see a liar? I never said. You didn't have to. Harper's voice broke completely. I can see it in your eyes, Julian. You don't trust me. She turned and walked toward the door, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. At the threshold, she stopped without turning around. I made a doctor's appointment for Monday. Dr. Sarah Chen at Swedish Medical. I was hoping you'd want to come with me, to see our baby for the first time. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Julian alone with his suspicions and the frozen frame of security footage still glowing on his laptop screen. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd hoped never to use. Marcus Reed, private investigator. If Harper was lying, if she was having an affair, Julian needed to know the truth, even if that truth destroyed everything he'd ever believed about the only woman he'd ever loved. Marcus Reed's office in Pioneer Square felt like stepping into a noir film. The private investigator was a lean man in his 50s with weathered hands and sharp eyes that had seen too much. Julian sat across from him, his expensive suit looking out of place among the cluttered desk and filing cabinets. So let me get this straight, Marcus said, reviewing his notes. You want me to investigate your own wife for adultery because she's pregnant and you believe you're sterile? That's correct. Julian's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, fidgeting with his wedding ring. I need to know who the father is. Marcus leaned back in his creaky chair. Mr. Hargrove, have you considered simply asking for a paternity test? It's a hell of a lot cheaper than hiring me. If I'm wrong, Julian paused, the weight of his suspicion heavy in his chest. If I'm wrong, I'll have destroyed my marriage over nothing. I need proof before I make any accusations. And if you're right, Julian's jaw tightened, then I need to know everything. How long it's been going on, where they meet, how extensive the betrayal is. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll need some information. Full name of the suspected party, his schedule, access to your wife's daily routine. Evan Mitchell, he's head of security at my building. And my wife? Julian hesitated. Speaking about Harper like this felt like betrayal itself. She's a data analyst. She works late frequently, often stays until 8 or 9 p.m. As Julian provided details, his phone buzzed with a text message. Harper's name appeared on the screen. Doctor appointment is Monday at 2 p.m. Swedish Medical Center, Dr. Chen's office. Really hoping you'll be there. We're in this together, remember? Julian stared at the message, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Harper's words sounded so genuine, so hopeful, but then he remembered Evan's hand on her back, the intimate way they'd stood together in the security footage. "There's something else," Julian said to Marcus. "I want to know if they've been meeting outside the office. Hotels, restaurants, anywhere they might think they're safe." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical for Seattle in early November. Julian stood in his office watching Harper through the glass partition that separated their work areas. She was wearing a soft blue sweater that complemented her complexion, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked tired, he noticed. There were faint shadows under her eyes. At 1:30 p.m., Harper appeared at his door with a tentative smile. "Ready to go see our baby?" Julian looked up from his computer, his expression unreadable. "I can't make it. The Tokyo contracts need my attention." The hope in Harper's eyes died instantly. "Julian, this is our first ultrasound. This is important. So is a $50 million deal." Harper stepped into his office and closed the door behind her. "This is our child we're talking about, our family." "Is it?" The words slipped out before Julian could stop them. Harper went completely still. "What did you just say?" Julian cursed himself internally but pressed forward. "I said I can't make it to the appointment." "No, you said, is it? Is it our child? Is that what you meant?" Harper's voice was quiet, dangerous in its control. "Julian, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me what you're really thinking." Julian met her gaze, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. "I think you should go to your appointment. Get the information we need." "The information we need?" Harper's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You mean confirmation that I'm pregnant? Because apparently my word isn't enough?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Harper's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "You think I'm lying about this pregnancy? Or worse, you think I'm lying about who the father is?" The accusation hung in the air between them like a live wire. Julian said nothing, which was confirmation enough. Harper's face went white. "Oh my God, you actually think I cheated on you?" "Harper? Who?" Her voice cracked. "Who do you think I'm sleeping with? Because clearly you've given this a lot of thought." Julian remained silent, but his eyes involuntarily flicked toward the security monitors that showed the building's lobby. Harper followed his gaze and saw Evan Mitchell at his desk, reviewing schedules with his team. "Evan?" Harper's voice was barely a whisper. "You think Evan and I—" "You spend a lot of time with him," Julian said coldly. "Late nights, private conversations." Harper stared at him as if seeing a stranger. "He's security. He checks on everyone who works late. And those private conversations? He's been asking for advice about proposing to his girlfriend, Amanda. They've been together for 2 years. Julian felt a flicker of uncertainty, but the medical report in his desk drawer kept his suspicions solid. "I'm going to the appointment," Harper said, her voice hollow. Alone, apparently. "But Julian, when I come back with pictures of our healthy baby, I want you to think about what you've done to us today." She walked to the door, then turned back one final time. 3 years of marriage, and you trust me so little that you think I'd betray you with another man and then lie to your face about carrying his child. That says more about you than it does about me." The door closed with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Julian sat alone in his office watching through the windows as Harper left the building 20 minutes later. She looked small and fragile as she walked to her car, one hand protectively over her stomach. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Reed. "First report ready? Found something interesting about their interactions. Meet tonight at 8 p.m. Julian closed his eyes and wondered if the truth he was so desperate to find would be worth the price he was already paying. The coffee shop on Capitol Hill was nearly empty at 8 p.m., just the way Marcus Reed preferred for sensitive meetings. Julian sat in a corner booth, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. When Marcus slid into the seat across from him, his expression was unreadable. "You're not going to like what I found," Marcus said without preamble, pulling out a manila folder. Julian's stomach tightened. "Just tell me." "Evan Mitchell, 34, clean record, been with your company for 3 years. And here's the kicker." Marcus opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. "This is Amanda Foster, his girlfriend of 2 years. Ring any bells?" Julian stared at the photo. A petite brunette with a warm smile, wearing scrubs. "Should it? She's a nurse at Swedish Medical Center, same hospital where your wife had her appointment today." Marcus leaned back. "I followed your wife after she left the building. She went straight to the doctor's office, spent an hour there, then met Amanda Foster for coffee. They know each other? Better than that. They're friends. Have been for over a year." Apparently your wife helped Amanda plan Evan's surprise birthday party last month. That's what all those intimate conversations were about. Party planning and relationship advice. Julian felt the ground shifting beneath him. That's not possible. Marcus slid another document across the table. Here's Amanda's work schedule. Every time you saw Evan staying late with your wife, Amanda was working the night shift. Evan was killing time waiting to pick up his girlfriend after her shift ended. The words hit Julian like physical blows. He stared at the evidence in front of him, his carefully constructed suspicions crumbling. There's more, Marcus continued. I talked to several of your employees. Everyone describes Evan and your wife as friendly colleagues, nothing more. But here's what's interesting. Multiple people mentioned that your wife has been looking pale and tired lately. Classic early pregnancy symptoms. Julian's hands shook as he reached for his coffee. You're saying there's no affair? I'm saying there's zero evidence of one. Your wife appears to be exactly what she claims to be, a pregnant woman whose husband doesn't trust her. Marcus closed the folder. Mr. Hargrove, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what cheating looks like, and this isn't it. Your wife went to that medical appointment alone today, and when she came out, she was crying. Not the tears of a woman caught in a lie, but the tears of someone whose husband abandoned her when she needed him most. Julian sat in stunned silence, processing the destruction he'd wrought based on nothing but his own fears and medical records from 8 years ago. One more thing, Marcus said, standing to leave. I'd recommend you get new fertility tests before you destroy your marriage completely. Medicine advances fast, and old diagnoses aren't always accurate. After Marcus left, Julian remained in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at the photographs and reports that proved his wife's innocence. His phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Baby is healthy. Due date is June 15th. I have pictures when you're ready to see them. Julian's throat tightened. June 15th. He counted backward in his mind. Conception would have been mid-September. He'd been home then, before his travels. If Harper was carrying his child, he drove home through the rainy Seattle streets, his mind racing. The Bellevue mansion was dark except for a single light in their bedroom. Julian found Harper sitting on their king-sized bed, still wearing the blue sweater from earlier, staring at a collection of ultrasound photos spread across the white comforter. How did it go? He asked quietly from the doorway. Harper didn't look up. You want to know now? Julian stepped into the room, his eyes drawn to the black and white images. Even in the grainy ultrasound photos, he could make out a tiny form. Their baby. Harper, The doctor said everything looks perfect. Harper continued, her voice eerily calm. Strong heartbeat, proper development for gestational age. She gave me vitamins and scheduled the next appointment for 4 weeks from now. Harper finally looked up at him, and Julian was shocked by the emptiness in her green eyes. The warmth, the love, the hope he'd always seen there. It was gone. I kept hoping you'd show up, she said. Even after our conversation, I thought maybe you'd change your mind and come see our baby with me. But you didn't. Harper, I made a mistake. A mistake? Harper's laugh was hollow. Julian, you accused me of adultery. You think I'm carrying another man's child. That's not a mistake. That's a fundamental breakdown of trust. Julian moved closer to the bed, reaching for one of the ultrasound photos. May I? Harper nodded silently. Julian picked up the image, studying the small form that was supposedly his child. For the first time since Harper's announcement, he allowed himself to feel wonder instead of suspicion. I can see the head, he whispered, and tiny arms and legs. Harper's voice softened slightly. The doctor said we could hear the heartbeat at the next appointment. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the photo. Harper, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Harper looked at him, waiting. Before we got married, I had medical tests done. They said I couldn't have children. The doctor told me I was sterile. Julian's voice cracked. When you told me you were pregnant, I didn't know how to process it. You thought I cheated. Harper's voice was flat. Instead of talking to me, instead of trusting me, you assumed the worst. I was scared, Julian admitted. Scared that I'd lose you if you knew the truth about my condition. And when you got pregnant, I was terrified that my worst fears were coming true. Harper was quiet for a long moment, processing his confession. Julian, did it ever occur to you that maybe the tests were wrong? That maybe medical science has changed in 8 years? Julian looked down at the ultrasound photo, seeing his child, their child, for the first time with clear eyes. I hired a private investigator to follow you, he confessed, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Harper's face went white. You did what? The silence that followed Julian's confession was deafening. Harper stared at him, as if he were a stranger who had broken into their bedroom and shattered everything sacred between them. "You hired someone to follow me," she repeated slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "While I was pregnant with your child, going through morning sickness, terrified and alone because my husband was treating me like a criminal, you actually paid someone to spy on me." Julian reached toward her, but Harper recoiled as if his touch would burn her. "Harper, I know how it sounds." "How it sounds?" Harper stood abruptly, the ultrasound photos scattering to the floor. "Julian, you violated my privacy, my dignity, my trust in the most fundamental way possible. You had me followed like some kind of suspect." She began pacing the length of their bedroom, her hands shaking with rage and hurt. The woman Julian had married, composed, analytical, always seeking solutions, was nowhere to be found. In her place was someone raw, broken, fighting for the pieces of herself he'd systematically destroyed. "What did he find?" Harper demanded, turning to face him. "What did your private investigator discover about your supposedly cheating wife?" Julian swallowed hard. "That you're innocent. That Evan is in love with Amanda, the nurse. That every late conversation was about party planning or relationship advice. That there's no affair, no betrayal, nothing except a pregnant woman whose husband refused to trust her." Harper laughed, but it was a sound devoid of humor. "Oh, how convenient. Now that you have proof from a stranger that I'm not a liar, you're ready to believe me. My word meant nothing, but a detective's report that's credible. That's not fair." "Fair?" Harper's voice rose to a pitch Julian had never heard before. "You want to talk about fair, Julian? Fair would have been you trusting the woman you married. Fair would have been you telling me about your medical concerns instead of building a case against me in your head. Fair would have been you coming to the doctor's appointment to see our baby instead of hiring someone to prove I'm an adulteress." Julian stood, desperate to bridge the growing chasm between them. "Harper, I was scared. The medical report said I couldn't have children. When you told me you were pregnant, my whole world turned upside down. I didn't know how to process it. So you decided I must be a cheater." Harper's green eyes blazed with fury. "That was your first thought. Not that maybe medical tests could be wrong. Not that maybe you should talk to your wife. Not that maybe we should figure this out together. No, you went straight to, Harper must be sleeping with someone else." "I'm sorry," Julian said, the words feeling pathetically inadequate. "I know I handled this all wrong." Harper stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "Do you know what the worst part is? It's not even that you suspected me of cheating. It's that you were willing to let me go through this pregnancy thinking you didn't want our baby. For weeks, Julian, I've been terrified that you didn't love me anymore, that somehow I'd failed you." Tears began streaming down Harper's face, and Julian felt his heart breaking with each drop. "I've been throwing up every morning, exhausted every afternoon, emotional and scared, and instead of having my husband's support, I've had his suspicion. I've been planning our future, picking out nursery colors in my head, imagining what our child would look like, and you've been planning my investigation." Julian moved toward her again. "Harper, please let me explain." "No." Harper held up her hand, stopping him cold. "I'm done listening to explanations. I'm done being the target of your paranoia and distrust." She walked to their walk-in closet and pulled out a suitcase, throwing it onto the bed where the ultrasound photos still lay scattered. "What are you doing?" Julian asked, panic rising in his chest. "I'm leaving." Harper began pulling clothes from hangers with sharp, efficient movements. "I can't stay here, Julian. I can't sleep next to someone who thinks so little of me. Harper, don't do this. We can work through this." Harper spun around, her face streaked with tears but her expression resolute. "Can we? Can we really? Because the foundation of our entire marriage was apparently built on quicksand. You never trusted me, Julian. 3 years together, and when the first real test came, you assumed the worst about my character." Julian watched helplessly as she packed, each item she folded and placed in the suitcase, feeling like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. "Where will you go?" he asked. "My sister's place in Portland. I need space to think, and our baby needs a mother who isn't constantly defending herself against accusations." "Our baby." Julian repeated the words, testing how they felt. "You really believe it's mine?" Harper froze, a blue blouse halfway into the suitcase. She turned to look at him with an expression of such profound hurt that Julian immediately regretted the question. "After everything, you're still asking that question?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Julian, I have never, not once in our entire relationship, been unfaithful to you. Not in thought, not in action, not even in fantasy. You are the only man I've been with since we met. The only man I've loved. The only man I've wanted a future with. She zipped the suitcase closed with violent efficiency. But if you still can't believe that, if even now you're questioning whether this baby is yours, then there's nothing left to save. Harper picked up one of the ultrasound photos from the floor and placed it on Julian's nightstand. Get new medical tests, Julian. Find out if you can father children. And when you discover that you can, when you realize that you destroyed our marriage over a medical error and your own insecurity, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that you chose suspicion over love. She wheeled her suitcase toward the bedroom door, then paused without turning around. I'll be in touch about the divorce papers. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that echoed like thunder. Julian stood alone in their bedroom, surrounded by the debris of their marriage and the ultrasound photos of the child he was only now beginning to believe might actually be his. 2 weeks after Harper left, Julian sat in Dr. Webb's pristine medical office in downtown Seattle, staring at test results that would change everything. The fertility specialist, a man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the papers with the thoroughness of someone delivering life-altering news. Mr. Hargrove, I've reviewed your new tests multiple times, Dr. Webb said carefully. Your sperm count and motility are completely normal. You are absolutely capable of fathering children. Julian's hands trembled as he reached for the report. But the tests from 2016 were a laboratory error. Dr. Webb pulled out an older file. I contacted the lab that processed your original tests. They discovered a clerical mistake. Your results were accidentally switched with another patient who did have a zoospermia. The error was never caught because you never came back for follow-up testing. The words hit Julian like a sledgehammer. 8 years of believing he was sterile. 8 years of building walls around his heart to protect himself from a future he thought he could never have. And now the devastating truth. He had destroyed his marriage over a medical mistake. The baby Harper is carrying, Julian said, his voice hoarse. It's definitely mine. Based on these results and the timeline you've provided, yes. Congratulations, Mr. Hargrove, you're going to be a father. Julian walked out of the medical building in a daze. Seattle's November rain pelted his face as he stood on the sidewalk, people rushing past him with umbrellas and purpose while his world crumbled around him. He pulled out his phone and called Harper's number, desperate to share the news, to apologize, to beg her to come home. The call went straight to voicemail. Harper, it's me, please call me back. I have the test results. You were right, I can have children. The baby is mine, it's ours, and I've made the most terrible mistake of my life. Please call me. He tried 3 more times. Each call went to voicemail. That evening, Julian drove to Portland. The 3-hour drive through the Columbia River Gorge felt like the longest journey of his life. Harper's sister Chloe lived in a cozy neighborhood near Mount Tabor, in a craftsman-style house with a green front door and a garden that was dormant for winter. Chloe answered the door with a look of barely contained fury. She was shorter than Harper, with darker blonde hair and the same green eyes that currently blazed with protective anger. You have some nerve showing up here, Chloe said, blocking the doorway. Chloe, please. I need to see Harper. I have news. News? Chloe's laugh was sharp. What kind of news, Julian? That you finally decided to trust your wife? That you finally figured out you're not sterile? Because Harper already knows all that. Julian's heart sank. She knows? Of course she knows. She's not stupid, Julian. She put the pieces together. Her husband thinks he's sterile. She gets pregnant. He accuses her of cheating. It wasn't exactly rocket science to figure out what was in your head. Behind Chloe, Julian caught a glimpse of Harper sitting on the living room couch, her hand resting on her now visible belly. She looked pale and tired, but undeniably beautiful. When their eyes met through the doorway, Harper looked away. Harper, please, Julian called out. Just give me 5 minutes. Harper stood slowly and walked to the door, her hand still protectively over her stomach. At 20 weeks pregnant, she was showing clearly now, her body nurturing the child Julian had been too blind to believe was his. 5 minutes, Harper said quietly. Chloe, it's okay. Chloe reluctantly stepped aside, but her expression made it clear she'd be watching Julian's every move. Harper led him to the front porch where they sat on opposite ends of a wooden swing that creaked softly in the evening breeze. I got the test results, Julian said without preamble. Dr. Webb confirmed it. I can have children. The original tests were wrong. A lab error. Harper nodded slowly. I figured as much. Harper, I am so sorry. I destroyed everything over a mistake. over my own fear and insecurity. I should have trusted you. I should have talked to you instead of building a case against you in my mind. Yes, you should have. Harper's voice was calm, eerily controlled. But you didn't. Julian reached toward her, stopping when she pulled back. Can we try again? Can we work through this? Harper was quiet for a long moment, watching the rain create patterns on the street. Julian, do you know what the worst part of these past few weeks has been? Tell me. It's not that you didn't trust me. It's that you were willing to let me suffer alone. Harper's voice cracked slightly. I've been dealing with morning sickness, with hormones, with fear about becoming a mother, and instead of having my partner's support, I've had his suspicion and judgment. I know, and I'm not finished. Harper's green eyes met his. I've spent nights crying myself to sleep, wondering what I did wrong, wondering why the man I love couldn't love me enough to believe in me. And now you show up with test results expecting everything to go back to normal? Julian felt tears burning his eyes. What can I do? Tell me how to fix this. Harper placed both hands on her belly, and Julian realized she was bigger than she'd been just 2 weeks ago. Their baby was growing, developing, becoming more real every day, and he was missing all of it. I don't know if you can fix this, Julian. Trust isn't something you can just restore with medical test results. You broke something fundamental between us. Harper, please, I love you, I love our baby. I know I messed up, but people make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. Harper's voice was firm. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or leaving the milk out overnight. This was a choice. You chose to believe the worst about me. You chose investigation over conversation. You chose fear over love. The porch light cast harsh shadows across Harper's face, highlighting the exhaustion and hurt that Julian had put there. I've filed for separation, Harper said quietly. Not divorce, not yet. But I need space, Julian. I need time to figure out if I can ever trust you again. Julian felt the world tilt beneath him. How much time? I don't know. Maybe until the baby is born. Maybe longer. Harper stood, her hand on her back as she adjusted to the weight she was carrying. I'll keep you informed about doctor's appointments, about how the pregnancy is progressing. This is your child too, and I won't keep you from that. But us, I don't know if there is an us anymore. Julian stood as well, desperate to hold her, to fix this somehow. Harper, I can change. I can be better. Can you? Harper looked at him with eyes that held more sadness than anger now. Because the Julian I married wouldn't have hired someone to follow me. The Julian I married would have talked to me when he was scared. I don't know who you became these past few weeks, but it wasn't the man I fell in love with. She moved toward the front door, then turned back one final time. Get help, Julian. See a therapist. Figure out why you were so quick to assume betrayal. And maybe, if you can become the man I thought I married, we can try to rebuild something. But it won't be the same. It can't be. The door closed behind her, leaving Julian alone on the porch in the rain, holding test results that had come too late to save his marriage. 3 months had passed since Harper left Seattle. Julian sat in Dr. Michelle Romano's therapy office in Capitol Hill, the same neighborhood where he'd met with Marcus Reed all those weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd hired someone to investigate his wife in this area, and now he was here trying to understand why he'd destroyed the most important relationship in his life. Tell me about the phone call, Dr. Romano said. She was a woman in her 40s with patient eyes and a direct manner that Julian had grown to appreciate over their weekly sessions. Harper called yesterday, Julian said, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. She's 32 weeks now. The baby is healthy, growing normally. She's having some back pain, but the doctor says that's typical. How did you feel hearing her voice? Julian closed his eyes. Grateful, terrified. She sounded tired, and I know part of that is because of what I put her through. She's carrying our child alone because I couldn't trust her. You've made significant progress in understanding your trust issues, Dr. Romano observed. What have you learned about yourself these past months? Julian had been dreading and anticipating this question. 3 months of therapy had peeled back layers of his psyche like an onion, revealing truths he'd spent decades avoiding. I learned that my father's abandonment affected me more than I admitted, Julian said slowly. When he left my mother for his secretary when I was 12, I internalized the idea that women leave when things get difficult, that they betray the men who love them. Dr. Romano nodded. And how did that manifest in your marriage? I was always waiting for Harper to leave, always looking for signs that she would hurt me the way my father hurt my mother. When the pregnancy happened and I couldn't reconcile it with my medical records, my mind went to the worst possible explanation because... Julian paused, The realization still painful, because I expected betrayal. I was looking for it. What else have you discovered? Julian shifted in his chair. That I used my wealth and success as armor. I convinced myself that if I controlled everything, my business, my environment, my relationships, I could prevent being hurt. But you can't control love, and you can't build a marriage on suspicion. The session ended with Dr. Romano's usual assignment. Julian was to write a letter to Harper, not to send, but to process his thoughts and feelings. He'd written dozens of these letters over the past months, each one revealing more about his journey toward healing. That evening, Julian sat in his empty Bellevue mansion, surrounded by the silence that had become his constant companion. The house felt like a mausoleum now, filled with memories of Harper's laughter, her presence, the life they'd built together. His phone buzzed with a text message. Harper's name appeared on the screen, and Julian's heart jumped as it did every time she contacted him. Doctor appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. Swedish Medical Center. Routine checkup, but you're welcome to come if you want. Julian stared at the message for a long time. This was the first time Harper had invited him to an appointment since the ultrasound he'd missed all those months ago. His hands shook as he typed his response. I would like that very much. Thank you. The next day, Julian arrived at Swedish Medical Center 30 minutes early, pacing the waiting room like an expectant father, which, he realized with a start, was exactly what he was. When Harper walked through the doors, Julian's breath caught in his throat. She was radiant. At 8 months pregnant, Harper glowed with the unmistakable beauty of impending motherhood. Her blonde hair was longer now, pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore a flowing navy dress that accentuated her rounded belly. She moved slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, but she was the most beautiful thing Julian had ever seen. Harper, he said, standing as she approached. Julian. Her voice was cordial, but guarded. Thank you for coming. They sat together in the waiting room, the space between them on the uncomfortable chairs feeling like an ocean. Julian wanted to reach out to touch her belly, to feel his child move, but he didn't dare without permission. How are you feeling? He asked. Tired. The baby's active at night, keeps me awake. Harper's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. She likes to kick right under my ribs. She? Julian's voice caught. We're having a daughter? Harper's expression softened slightly. I found out last month. I meant to tell you, but... She trailed off, but Julian understood. Their communication had been limited to medical updates and logistics. There was no room for shared joy in their fractured relationship. A daughter, Julian repeated, wonder in his voice. Do you have a name picked out? I've been thinking about it, but I thought maybe we should choose together, if you want to be involved in that decision. Before Julian could respond, a nurse called Harper's name. They walked together down the sterile hallway to Dr. Chen's office, Julian's hands itching to support Harper as she moved slowly, but maintaining the careful distance she'd established. Dr. Chen was a warm Asian woman in her 50s, who greeted them both professionally. Mr. Hargrove, it's good to see you. Harper mentioned you'd be joining us today. The examination was routine, checking the baby's position, measuring Harper's belly, listening to the heartbeat. When Dr. Chen placed the fetal Doppler on Harper's stomach, the room filled with the rapid, strong sound of their daughter's heartbeat. Julian felt tears well up in his eyes. She sounds strong, very strong, Dr. Chen confirmed. Everything looks perfect. The baby is in the right position. Harper's blood pressure is good, and we're on track for a normal delivery. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen handed them information about childbirth classes. I'd recommend starting these soon. It's helpful for both parents to understand what to expect during labor and delivery. In the parking lot, Harper turned to Julian with an expression he couldn't read. Would you want to take the classes with me? Julian's heart stopped. Are you asking me to be your birth partner? Harper looked down at her belly, her hand making slow circles over the fabric of her dress. I'm asking if you want to be there when our daughter is born. Despite everything that's happened between us, she's still your child, and you should have the chance to be part of this if you want to be. Harper, there's nothing I want more in this world. This doesn't mean we're getting back together, Harper said quickly. This is about our daughter, not about us. I'm still living in Portland. I'm still processing everything that happened. But I don't want our problems to rob you of experiencing your child's birth. Julian nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. I understand. And Harper, I want you to know I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Romano. I'm trying to understand why I reacted the way I did, why I couldn't trust you. Harper studied his face for a moment. Good. That's good, Julian. They stood in the parking lot as the Seattle drizzle began. Two people who had once shared everything now carefully navigating the boundaries of their new reality. The first childbirth class is next Wednesday at 7 p.m., Harper said. If you want to come, I'll be there. Harper nodded and walked toward her car, a modest Honda Civic that Julian realized must be a rental or something Chloe had helped her get. As he watched her drive away, Julian felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It wasn't hope for their marriage. That might be lost forever. But it was hope that he could be the father their daughter deserved, even if he'd failed as the husband Harper needed. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in mid-June. Julian bolted upright in his empty king-sized bed, fumbling for his phone in the darkness of the Bellevue mansion. Julian? Harper's voice was tight with pain and barely controlled fear. It's time. The contractions started an hour ago and they're getting closer together. Julian was already throwing on clothes, his heart pounding with adrenaline and terror. Are you at Swedish Medical? Chloe's driving me there now. The contractions are about 4 minutes apart. Harper's voice broke slightly as another wave of pain hit her. Oh God, Julian, this is really happening. I'm on my way. Hang tight, okay? You're going to be amazing. Julian broke every speed limit between Bellevue and Seattle, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he navigated the empty, early morning streets. The past month of childbirth classes had created a tentative bridge between him and Harper. Not romantic, but functional, focused entirely on preparing for their daughter's arrival. He found Harper in the labor and delivery ward, pacing the hallway with Chloe's support. She was wearing a hospital gown, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and Julian could see the intensity of labor written across her beautiful face. How are you doing? Julian asked, approaching carefully. Like someone squeezing my entire body in a vice every few minutes, Harper managed, attempting a weak smile. But according to the nurse, I'm progressing normally. Chloe squeezed Harper's hand. I'm going to get some coffee and call Mom. Julian, you've got this? Julian nodded and for the first time in months found himself alone with Harper during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. The breathing techniques from class aren't working like they said they would, Harper admitted as they walked slowly down the hallway. This is so much more intense than I expected. Julian remembered their instructor's advice about being a supportive birth partner. Here, let me help. Remember the rhythm we practiced? When the next contraction hit, Julian guided Harper through the breathing pattern they'd learned together, his hand gently rubbing her lower back the way the nurse had demonstrated. For those 60 seconds, they weren't estranged spouses. They were just two people bringing their child into the world. Better? Julian asked as the contraction subsided. Harper nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. I know this is weird for both of us, but I'm glad you're here. Dr. Chen arrived an hour later and examined Harper in the private labor room they'd been assigned. You're at 6 centimeters, she announced. Still a few hours to go, but everything looks perfect. As the morning progressed, Julian fell into the rhythm of labor support. He fetched ice chips when Harper was thirsty, adjusted the pillows when she needed to change positions, and talked her through each contraction with a patience and tenderness that surprised them both. I never thought you'd be good at this, Harper said during a brief respite between contractions. You're usually so controlled, so analytical, but this is different. Julian brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead. Maybe because this isn't about me. It's about you and our daughter. I can't control labor, I can't analyze it away. I can just be here for you. Around noon, Harper's labor intensified dramatically. The contractions were coming fast and hard, and Julian could see her strength beginning to waver. I can't do this, Harper gasped, gripping Julian's hand so tightly he thought she might break his fingers. It hurts too much. I'm not strong enough. Hey, look at me, Julian said, positioning himself so Harper could focus on his face. You are the strongest person I know. You've been carrying our daughter for 9 months. You've dealt with everything I put you through, and you're still here, still fighting. You can absolutely do this. But what if something goes wrong? What if I can't push her out? What if, Harper? Julian's voice was firm but gentle. I've spent months learning to trust the process, to stop trying to control everything. Right now, your body knows what to do. Our daughter knows what to do. You just have to trust yourself. Harper stared into his gray eyes, finding something there she hadn't seen in months. Complete, unwavering faith in her. At 2:17 p.m., Dr. Chen announced that it was time to push. The next 43 minutes were the most intense of Julian's life. He watched Harper summon strength from somewhere deep inside herself, watched her fight through pain that would have felled anyone else, watched her bring their daughter into the world with a ferocity and determination that left him in awe. "She's here," Dr. Chen announced, and suddenly the room was filled with the most beautiful sound Julian had ever heard, his daughter's first cry. "Is she okay?" Harper asked, exhausted but alert. "She's perfect," Dr. Chen said, placing the baby on Harper's chest. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and absolutely beautiful. Julian stared at his daughter in wonder. She was tiny and wrinkled and covered in vernix, with a shock of dark hair and the most perfect little face he'd ever seen. When she opened her eyes and looked directly at him, Julian felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. "She has your eyes," Harper whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Those same gray eyes. And your stubborn chin," Julian said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Harper, she's incredible." Dr. Chen clamped the umbilical cord and handed Julian surgical scissors. "Would you like to cut the cord, Dad?" Julian's hands shook as he performed the simple act that would physically separate his daughter from Harper, while symbolically connecting her to him forever. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, preparing the birth certificate paperwork. Harper looked at Julian. "We never finished that conversation." "I've been thinking about it," Julian said softly, his finger gently stroking their daughter's tiny hand. "What about Grace? For the grace you've shown me even when I didn't deserve it, and because she's already brought Grace into our lives." Harper's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Grace Harper Hargrove? Perfect," Julian whispered. As the medical team cleaned up and performed routine checks on Grace, Julian found himself standing beside Harper's bed, both of them watching their daughter sleep in the bassinet beside them. "She's ours," Harper said softly, wonder in her voice. "She's ours," Julian agreed. For a moment, exhausted and overwhelmed by the miracle they'd just witnessed, they were just Grace's parents, not estranged spouses, not people working through trust issues, just a mother and father marveling at the life they'd created together. "Julian," Harper said quietly, not taking her eyes off Grace, "thank you for being here, for being the partner I needed during labor. I couldn't have done this without you." Julian felt tears slide down his cheeks. "Thank you for letting me be here, for giving me the chance to see our daughter born. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Harper, what we just did together, bringing Grace into the world, that was the most important thing I'll ever do." Harper finally looked at him, and Julian saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in months. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of it. A recognition that despite everything that had gone wrong between them, they had done this one thing beautifully right. Grace stirred in her bassinet, making the tiny mewing sounds that all newborns make, and both parents immediately turned their attention to her, their broken marriage temporarily forgotten in the presence of the perfect little person they had made together. 6 weeks after Grace's birth, Julian stood outside the modest Portland apartment Harper had rented, holding a carrier with their sleeping daughter. The July afternoon was warm, and through the open windows, he could hear Harper moving around inside, probably cleaning up after their visit. These weekly exchanges had become their new normal. Julian would drive down from Seattle every Saturday to spend time with Grace, then return her to Harper on Sunday evening. It was a carefully orchestrated dance of shared parenting that kept them connected while maintaining the emotional distance Harper still needed. But today felt different. Today, Julian had something to say that couldn't wait any longer. Harper opened the door before he could knock, her blonde hair caught in the afternoon sunlight. 6 weeks postpartum, she was more beautiful than ever. Motherhood had added a softness to her features, a confidence in her movements that took Julian's breath away. "How was she?" Harper asked, reaching for Grace's carrier. "Perfect, as always. She slept through most of our walk around the waterfront." Julian lingered in the doorway instead of immediately leaving as he usually did. "Harper, can we talk? There's something I need to tell you." Harper's expression grew cautious, but she stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small but cozy, with Grace's bassinet positioned near the couch and baby toys scattered on the coffee table. Pictures of Grace's first weeks covered the refrigerator, moments Julian had missed because he'd been in Seattle, giving Harper space. "What's on your mind?" Harper asked, settling into the rocking chair she'd bought for nursing. Julian sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together. "I got a call from my lawyer yesterday. The final divorce papers are ready for signing." Harper's face went carefully blank. "Okay, Harper, I can't sign them." The words hung in the air between them like a live wire. Harper's green eyes searched his face, looking for an explanation that would make sense of what he'd just said. Julian, we've been separated for 8 months. We agreed. I know what we agreed, Julian interrupted gently. I know you filed for separation, and I know I gave you every reason to want out of this marriage. But Harper, I can't sign those papers because I'm still in love with you. Harper stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the quiet Portland street. Julian, you can't just— Let me finish, please. Julian's voice was steady, but desperate. I've spent 8 months in therapy, learning about myself, understanding why I reacted the way I did. I've learned that my father's abandonment made me expect betrayal from everyone I love. I've learned that I used control as a shield against vulnerability. I've learned that I was so terrified of losing you that I created the very circumstances that drove you away. Harper kept her back to him, her shoulders tense. And what am I supposed to do with that information, Julian? Forget everything that happened? Pretend you didn't hire someone to follow me while I was pregnant with your child? No, Julian said, standing and moving closer to her. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to consider whether the man I've become is worth taking a chance on. Harper turned to face him, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. How can I trust you again? How can I know that the next time we face a crisis, you won't assume the worst about me? Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because I wrote you a letter. Actually, I wrote you dozens of letters over the past 8 months. But this one is different. He handed her the paper, his hands trembling slightly. Dr. Romano helped me write this. It's a contract, not a legal one, but a personal one. It's every commitment I'm making to you, to us, to our family. It's how I plan to be different if you'll give me another chance. Harper unfolded the letter with shaking hands. Julian watched her face as she read the words he'd agonized over for weeks. Harper, I promise to trust you completely, even when fear tells me otherwise. I promise to communicate my fears and insecurities instead of acting on them in destructive ways. I promise to choose love over suspicion, conversation over assumption, faith over fear. I promise to continue therapy for as long as it takes to be the husband and father you both deserve. I promise to support your dreams and independence, not try to control them. Most importantly, I promise to remember every day that you chose to love me, and to never take that choice for granted again. If I ever fail these promises, I will own my failure completely and work immediately to repair any damage I've caused. You and Grace are my everything. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I understand how precious you both are. Julian Harper's tears fell freely now as she finished reading. She sank back into the rocking chair, the letter clutched against her chest. Julian, she whispered, I want to believe you. I want to trust that you've changed. But I'm terrified. What if we try again and you hurt me like that again? What if Grace grows up watching her parents destroy each other? Julian knelt beside her chair, careful not to touch her without permission. Harper, I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, but I can promise that I will never again let fear make me cruel to the woman I love. I will never again choose suspicion over faith in you. Grace stirred in her carrier and began to fuss. Without thinking, both parents moved toward her simultaneously, their hands briefly touching as they reached for their daughter. The contact sent electricity through Julian, and he saw Harper's breath catch. Harper lifted Grace and settled back in the rocking chair to nurse her. Julian watched his wife, because she was still his wife, feed their daughter, and felt overwhelmed by the beauty of the scene, the rightness of it. She looks like you when she concentrates, Harper said softly, looking down at Grace, the same little furrow between her eyebrows. She has your determination, Julian replied, and your beautiful heart. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Grace nurse. Finally, Harper looked up at Julian with an expression he couldn't quite read. If we try again, she said slowly, it has to be different. Not just you being different, but us being different. We have to rebuild from the ground up. Julian's heart stopped. Are you saying? I'm saying I miss us, Harper admitted. I miss my best friend, my partner, the man who used to make me laugh until my sides hurt. I miss the team we used to be before fear made us enemies. Harper, if you give me another chance, I will spend every day earning your trust back. I will be the husband you deserve and the father Grace needs. Harper was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Couples therapy, she said finally. Both of us together working through this properly. Yes, absolutely. And we take it slow. We don't just jump back into the marriage we had. We build something new, something stronger. Whatever you need, Julian said. Whatever it takes. Harper reached out and touched his face gently, her thumb brushing away a tear he didn't realize had fallen. I love you, Julian. I never stopped loving you, even when I hated what you'd done to us. But love isn't enough. We need trust, communication, and the commitment to do better. We can have all of that, Julian said, covering her hand with his. We can have everything, Harper. We can be the family Grace deserves. Grace finished nursing and looked up at both her parents with those serious gray eyes. For a moment, the three of them formed a perfect triangle, a family that had been broken but might, with work and love and commitment, be healed. Okay, Harper whispered. Let's try again. Julian leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently, the way he had on their wedding day, the way he should have done when she told him she was pregnant, the way he promised himself he would do every day for the rest of their lives. Outside, the Portland summer evening painted the world in shades of gold and possibility. Inside the small apartment, a family that had been shattered by fear and mistrust took its first tentative steps toward healing, guided by love and the promise of better days ahead. 2 years later, the Seattle Children's Hospital pediatric wing buzzed with activity on a crisp October morning. Julian sat in the waiting room, bouncing 2-year-old Grace on his knee while Harper filled out paperwork for their daughter's routine checkup. Grace babbled happily, her dark curls bouncing as she pointed at the colorful murals on the walls. "Daddy, fishy!" Grace exclaimed, spotting a painted seahorse. "That's right, sweetheart. It's a seahorse," Julian said, kissing the top of her head. "Can you say seahorse?" "Seahorse," Grace attempted, clapping her hands with delight. Harper looked up from her paperwork and smiled, the genuine, radiant smile that had first captured Julian's heart 4 years ago. She was wearing a soft green sweater that complemented her eyes and made her blonde hair shine. At 31, she was more beautiful than ever, her face showing the contentment of a woman who had fought for her happiness and won. "She's getting so articulate," Harper said, reaching over to smooth Grace's curls. "Dr. Peterson is going to be impressed with her vocabulary." Julian watched his wife interact with their daughter and felt the familiar swell of gratitude that had become his constant companion over the past 2 years. The road back to each other hadn't been easy. 18 months of couples therapy, countless difficult conversations, moments of doubt and breakthrough in equal measure. But they had done the work, both of them, and built something stronger than what they'd had before. "Harper Hargrove?" A nurse called from the doorway. As they gathered Grace's things, Julian's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Romano. "How's the family doing? Looking forward to our session next week." Julian still saw his therapist monthly, a commitment he'd maintained even after he and Harper had reconciled. It was part of the promises he'd made, not just to get better, but to stay better. "Work emergency?" Harper asked, noticing his phone. "Just Dr. Romano checking in," Julian replied, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Nothing urgent." Harper nodded, and Julian caught the brief look of appreciation in her eyes. The transparency, the immediate honesty, these were the new patterns they'd built to replace the old habits of secrecy and assumption. 30 minutes later, they emerged from Dr. Peterson's office with a glowing report on Grace's development and a prescription for children's vitamins. Grace had charmed everyone in the office, as she always did, with her infectious giggle and curious nature. "Ice cream?" Julian suggested as they walked to the parking garage. "To celebrate Grace's perfect checkup?" "Ice cream?" Grace shouted, throwing her tiny hands in the air. Harper laughed. "Well, I guess we have our answer." They drove to Pike Place Market, where they'd had their first official date 4 years ago. The afternoon was unseasonably warm for October, and they found a bench overlooking Elliott Bay while Grace attacked a small cup of strawberry ice cream with the determination of a tiny warrior. "Messy," Grace announced, holding up her pink-stained hands. "Very messy," Harper agreed, pulling wet wipes from her purse. "But worth it?" "Worth it," Grace confirmed, already reaching for another spoonful. Julian watched his daughter's face light up with simple joy and felt his chest tighten with emotion. 2 years ago, he'd almost missed all of this. The first words, the first steps, the daily miracle of watching Grace discover the world. His fear and inability to trust had nearly cost him everything that mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Harper asked, settling beside him on the bench while Grace focused on her ice cream. "Just this," Julian said, gesturing to encompass their small family scene. 2 years ago, I was convinced I'd lost you both forever, and now Grace is calling me Daddy, and you're wearing your wedding ring again, and we're planning her birthday party next month." Harper looked down at the platinum band on her finger, the same simple ring Julian had chosen when they first got married, but now it carried deeper meaning. She'd put it back on 6 months ago, during a particularly meaningful therapy session where they'd both finally felt ready to fully commit to their rebuilt marriage. "We almost didn't make it," Harper said quietly. "There were moments in therapy when I wasn't sure we could bridge the gap between who we were and who we needed to become. But we did," Julian said, reaching for her hand. "We both chose to do the work." "Every day," Harper agreed. "It's not like the movies where you forgive someone and everything goes back to normal. Trust is something you have to rebuild brick by brick." Grace finished her ice cream and toddled over to a nearby flower bed, fascinated by the late-blooming chrysanthemums. Julian and Harper watched her carefully, ready to intervene if she got too close to the busy walkway. "I have something to tell you," Harper said, a note of excitement in her voice. Julian turned to look at her fully. "Good news or concerning news?" "Good news, I think. I hope." Harper's cheeks flushed pink. "The promotion came through. They're offering me the senior analyst position at the new Portland office. It would mean more money, better benefits, and, Julian prompted, though he thought he knew where this was going, and the opportunity to relocate back to Seattle. They want someone to establish the satellite office here." Harper's words came out in a rush. "I know we've been commuting between Portland and Seattle for the past year, and I know Grace would benefit from having both her parents in the same city full-time." Julian felt his heart stop. For the past year, they'd been doing a complicated dance. Julian spending weekends in Portland, Harper bringing Grace to Seattle for extended visits, both of them maintaining separate residences, while slowly rebuilding their marriage. It had worked, but it had also been exhausting. "Harper, that's incredible news," Julian said, "but only if it's what you want. Not because you think it's what I want, or what would be easier for our arrangement." This was the new Julian, the man who asked what his wife wanted instead of assuming, who prioritized her happiness and autonomy over his own convenience. Harper smiled, and Julian saw tears gathering in her green eyes. "I want to come home, Julian. I want Grace to grow up in the house where we plan to raise her. I want Sunday morning pancakes in our kitchen and bedtime stories in the nursery you designed. I want us to be a family in the same zip code." "Mama, Daddy, flower," Grace called out, holding up a chrysanthemum she'd somehow managed to pick without anyone noticing. They both laughed and went to retrieve their adventurous daughter, who was already looking for her next target of exploration. "When would you start?" Julian asked as they walked back toward the car. "Next month, which means we'd need to find a place here, figure out childcare, all the logistics of the house," Julian interrupted. "Our house in Bellevue. I never sold it. I couldn't bring myself to let it go completely." Harper stopped walking. "You kept the house?" "I kept hope," Julian admitted. "Even when you filed for separation, even when it looked like we were over for good, I kept hoping that someday you'd want to come home." Harper's tears spilled over then, and she stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, the first truly spontaneous kiss they'd shared since reconciling. It tasted like possibility and strawberry ice cream, and the future they were still building together. "Home?" she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I want to come home." As they loaded Grace into her car seat, Julian caught sight of his reflection in the car window. The man looking back at him was different from the one who had destroyed his marriage 2.5 years ago. This man had learned to trust instead of control, to communicate instead of assume, to love instead of fear. "Daddy sing?" Grace requested as they pulled out of the parking garage. Julian looked at Harper, who nodded encouragingly. He began singing one of Grace's favorite lullabies, his voice mixing with Harper's harmonizing alto and Grace's enthusiastic off-key contribution from the back seat. Driving through Seattle toward their future, Julian thought about the medical report that had started this whole journey, the lab error that had convinced him he couldn't have children, leading to the suspicion that had nearly destroyed everything beautiful in his life. That piece of paper was long gone, shredded and thrown away during one of his therapy sessions, but the lessons it had ultimately taught him would last forever. Love required faith, marriage required work, forgiveness required time, and sometimes, if you were very lucky and very committed to change, you got a second chance to do it right. As they turned onto the highway that would take them home to Bellevue, Julian reached over and took Harper's hand. She squeezed his fingers in return, and Grace's laughter filled the car like music. They were going home, all of them, together. Would you have fought as hard as Julian did to save your marriage? Or would you have accepted the consequences and moved on? Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect beginnings, but about imperfect people choosing to rebuild something beautiful from the ashes of their mistakes. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.